This is Second Presbyterian Youth Group, and we are interviewing some members of our church this evening. And now I'd like to present David Bridges.
What historic events were going on, and how did it affect your high school experience?
Historic events. I went to high school in 1960 to 1964. So I remember when JFK was elected president, which was a big deal because he was a Catholic. And there was questions about would the United States, basically a Protestant country, elect a Catholic. And such a young man, because he followed Dwight Eisenhower, who was president for 2 terms, that was a big deal. And there was a big sweep of energy about 1960. And during that early part of it, when I was in high school, I was in a little rural high school in Georgia. So we didn't get affected by it too much. The civil rights issue became a big deal then. And we watched the marches and the unfortunate killings and things that went on television. It was just shocking. We had no idea about that in Georgia much. And of course, Kennedy was killed in 1962, so I remember where I was in history class and heard the announcement over the intercom. The Beatles were making their way over and getting big, and I watched them in 1964 on television on the Ed Sullivan Show live and thought, this guy's got a lot of hair. That's what I actually thought, of which I am very jealous now. And the Vietnam War began in the 60s with Johnson. So it was a turbulent time for us. And again, I was sort of sheltered back from that because I was in a small town. But I was close enough to Atlanta to see some of the things that happened. That were some of the things.
All right, tell me about your school dances.
School dances, well, I need to tell you that my mother told me that dancing caused pregnancy, so I didn't want to get, that's true, I didn't want to get pregnant, so I never did, I didn't dance much. And the first time I tried it was kind of weird because the girl felt strange, you know. So I didn't go to too many school dances, actually. And that, I'm telling you the truth. I'm not making that up.
What was your favorite band or your favorite musician?
Well, also, I'm dropping names here. I heard Elvis sing on the radio in 1950 something or other. You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog. And I thought, that guy sounds kind of strange. It didn't really knock me over. I can remember in high school, all the 60s bands that were big came out. I remember the Beach Boys because I thought they sang cool harmony, so I really liked them a lot. There were a lot of one-hit wonders that came through. Motown began. Pop music was just a little bitty sort of surging moment then. It's hard to imagine now with 3,000 radio stations all segmented into some market. There was no one radio station devoted to pop music then, of any kind. So one station in Atlanta started playing what we would call popular music, and the Beach Boys were one of them, the Beatles were another, and the jukeboxes all had those on them. And we played those and sang along some, as well as a lot of groups that I've long forgotten their names. And some of the country artists who were then young, who are now either dead or pretty old, I enjoyed hearing. I thought country music was a horrendously backwater redneck thing, and I moved to Nashville, and all of my worst fears were, so the one that sticks out in my mind the most would be the Beach Boys. I liked Elvis too, and Jerry Lee Lewis, people like that came along with that Carl Perkins era. It's a long answer, but those are the ones. I didn't have any one favorite band.
What after-school activities did you participate in?
Well, when I was in junior high school, I played football for 3 years, and we had a really bad team. I played center. Excuse me. I also played end, and I need to say that schools were still segregated. So it was just a bunch of slow white boys playing football. But we were also small and slow and white, so anytime we played a team that was bigger than we are, they beat the heck out of us. The last very game I played in junior high, we played a little bitty town little place on a map that's now suburbs of Atlanta, but it's called, I can't remember the name of it now anyway. And I was playing center, and you played both ways back then, so I was playing center, and something got a hold of me, and I thought I was going to tackle anybody with the ball. And I was a pretty big, heavy 140, I was pretty big for a junior high kid. So I did 3 stops right as if a linebacker today would do. I just put my head down and buried the guy. He was bigger than I was. And man, I thought that was the coolest thing I ever done, hitting that guy. And we actually won that game 2-0 because another guy and I tackled this guy in the end zone because their team was slower, smaller, and whiter, if you could beat, than ours. And we knocked him out. And I was the hero of the game. I thought I'd play football in high school, but oh no, I didn't do that. So my after-school activities then were band. I played in the band 4 years in high school.
What experiences did you have with bullying in your school?
There was actually a good bit of it went on. There were some big boys in high school. I was about this size and weighed about 140. And unfortunately, my high school had a little, like all high schools, had cliques. And the high school I went, the group that I ran with was sort of a remnant of Southern aristocracy that was in the little county seat town I was in. They had money. I didn't, but they did. And then there was a bunch of really pretty rugged folks from the countryside. And occasionally I didn't get in a fight. I got in one sort of fight, but we get in fights. And the principal was a little small guy. He was smaller than us, but everybody was scared of him. His name was Mr. Baker. And there was a bunch of guys. They'd walk down the hall and make cracks about us for no reason, I thought. And so we were stupid enough to make cracks about them. And I remember this one guy took on my buddy, whose name was David Hudson. And I stepped in, and he hit me. And I didn't hit him back because, A, it hurt, and I didn't want to get in a fight. But I had to go to the principal's office, and we talked it over. And I was desperately afraid of that guy. He was bigger than I was. And this is, again, it's true. I don't wish this on anybody. But 2 days later, he shot himself in the foot. So he couldn't come back to high school for like 6 weeks. I was safe until he came back. Then he was a nice guy. So there was bullying. Yes, there was. That's not new to you.
Was religion a big part of your life growing up?
It was. My father was a Baptist minister, a Southern Baptist minister, and the growing up times I'm telling you of, we lived in a small town called Locust Grove in Georgia, about 35 miles south of Atlanta. It's now swallowed up in Atlanta sprawl, but then it was a little rural county. And we moved there when I was in the 4th grade. And so my dad, a Baptist, believed in salvation by attending church. And I must have gone to church 4 or 5 times a week for various things. So it was a big deal. We went Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and other things, revivals. And I liked the revivals because in a rural area, they had 2 services, one at noon in the blazing hot weather of August in Georgia, if you can imagine that, no air conditioning, and then one at night. And church members would take out the visiting minister and the minister of the church and his family, that was me and my mother, to eat. They wouldn't go to a restaurant, we'd go to their homes. So by the end of the week, we just stuffed ourselves with all the wonderful country cooking. I thought that was great, so I could endure the heat. And I learned to sing and going to church too. Also, I started singing as a soprano when my voice had not changed. And then when it changed, I went through numbers of traumas and ended up a bass. So I have a fond memory of going to church because of the social activity. It was a small town and everybody knew each other. And the only other church we had in town was a Methodist church, which was sort of like the same thing back in the 60s. So it was a big part. And I was very serious about religion and belief as a Baptist and have kept that serious attitude, though I'm not a Baptist anymore. I mean, not formally. I'm a Baptist because they hold you down. They dunk you. And they hold you down until you say, I'll be a Baptist forever. I'm making that up, but that's really true. So yes, it was very important. It is still.
And what kind of grades did you make?
What kind of grades? I was sort of a pretty good but not brilliant student. I studied just as much as I had to, and not a whole lot more. Honest. I graduated with honors from high school, and but I was like the next to the last person who did that in the list. I listed them down by grade average. And I liked to study. I liked to read. Enjoyed that. I was not athletic. I did hunt and fish, which was another thing guys did then, but I did not play any organized sports in school after junior high. So I made pretty good grades.
In school, who was your favorite teacher?
Well, I had 2 or 3 of them. I'll tell you about them. I had a guy when I was a sophomore in high school whose name was Hudson. I remember him very, very well. And he was an interesting man. He's the first man I'd ever met who had this kind of very effeminate way of doing things. He probably was a gay man, but back then, you never said that. You never said that. I mean, that was not anything to say. He was married, but I'm guessing he was, thinking back. But kids liked him. And even in that kind of rural macho society that I grew up in, pretty rough-cut place, he was a great English teacher. So I really did like that. I nearly majored in English when I went to college because of his influence. Okay, that's one, Mr. Hudson. When I was a senior, I had to take chemistry. I'm not a chemist. I didn't like it. But the woman who taught it had just graduated from high school, and she was from a local girl named Carita Shaw. And she was the first teacher I had met in high school that was under the age of, say, 100, you know? I mean, they were all pretty old, I thought. And so I needed a lot of extra help with chemistry. I had a lot of one-on-one sessions for chemistry that year because I didn't care anything about chemistry. I just wanted to be around her. She's pretty good looking. So those are my 2 favorite teachers.
Who was your best friend in middle school or high school?
Middle school was a guy named Charlie Buchanan, whom I've lost touch with. He and I were buddies a good bit. He was an only child, lived up the road about half a mile. And we just palled around a lot, had the same interests. We liked to watch the original Star Trek and on a black and white TV. Can you imagine that big? Really amazing. And we'd camp out together and things like that. In high school, I met a guy named Wendell Massey, who was a year older than I. And he became, I guess, my best friend, though Charlie was, he lived in a little town where the school was. And he got a car first. He was the first guy to get a car. He got a 1951 Ford. And he was so excited. It had no starter and no heater in it. It had an engine. He bought it for $100. So the first day he got it to school, and then he wanted me to come out and help him push it off, which I did. And it was in winter time, so we froze to death in that little car. We drove around. And he and I did a good bit, shall we say, of illegal drag racing in high school. So I'm glad to be alive. We both survived that. He was a good guy. In fact, when I came back from college, he'd bought a new car and he wanted to run me a drag race, and he did, and he beat me. That was the last time I ever did that.